The sound of laughter echoed through the house as I stepped inside with a small container of oatmeal cookies. My hands trembled slightly, more from nerves than age. I hadn't seen Derek in weeks, and I wanted to surprise him. When I heard he'd won the lottery, $15 million they said, I didn't want money. I just wanted to hug my son, tell him how proud I was, and maybe share a cup of coffee. "Derek?" I called out, clutching the container close to my chest. From the kitchen, his voice snapped back, sharper than I'd expected. "What are you doing here, Mom?" I smiled gently and stepped closer. "I brought some cookies. Your favorite. Thought you might want to celebrate together." His wife, Tina, leaned against the counter with her arms folded. She didn't say a word, just raised her eyebrows like I was some stranger who'd wandered in off the street. Derek stepped toward me. His eyes weren't warm like they used to be. They were cold. "Celebrate?" he said. "Celebrate what? You think this is your moment too?" I blinked. "Of course not, honey. I thought maybe we could sit and talk. I'm so happy for you." He scoffed. "Happy for me? You think I'm giving you any of this because I'm not a single cent. I didn't ask for money." He cut me off. "Don't lie. That's what this is, isn't it? You came crawling over here to get a piece of my winnings." I stood still, stunned. "Derek, I changed your diapers. I worked double shifts for years so you could have shoes on your feet. I'm not here for your money." "You're not getting a dime from me, you old witch," he shouted suddenly, his face turning red. Behind him, Tina didn't flinch. She smirked like it was a joke. My heart felt like it stopped for a second. He'd never spoken to me like that. Never with such hatred in his voice. "You're not welcome here anymore," he growled. "Get out." I live in the guest room," I said softly. "You said I could stay until—" "That was before I became a millionaire. I don't need you anymore." He stormed down the hall, grabbed my small suitcase, and threw it across the floor toward the front door. "Take your junk and go live somewhere else." I stood there frozen as my coat and shoes tumbled out of the case. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear. "Don't come crawling back when you're starving," Tina added. I slowly knelt down and packed my things with shaky hands. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just kept breathing and folding. I paused for a moment, fingers brushing against something in the pocket of my sweater. A small piece of paper. The lottery ticket. I looked at it for a moment, then quietly slid it deeper into my pocket and zipped it shut. Without a word, I stood up, pulled my coat on, and turned to the door. Derek was still shouting something, but I no longer listened. I walked out slowly, one step at a time, my back straight. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I didn't curse or fight. I just left. The wind was cold against my cheeks as I stepped off the porch. My suitcase rattled behind me on one wheel. I walked away from the house where I had once sung lullabies and told bedtime stories. And I never looked back. To support stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. It truly helps the channel grow and bring more powerful storytelling to you. 3 days earlier. It had been a slow, cloudy afternoon. I was on my way back from the library after helping Mrs. Langston with her tablet. The wind was nipping at my coat, and I had just enough left in my purse for eggs and maybe a loaf of bread. I stopped by the gas station, mostly out of habit. I always liked the man who worked behind the counter, Hector. He reminded me of my late husband, always smiling, always gentle. "Ms. Gloria," he greeted. "Still reading those mystery novels?" I chuckled and held up the paperback in my hand. Old habits die hard. I placed a carton of eggs on the counter, counted my money carefully, and saw the bright blue and gold lottery banner behind him. $10 for the Mega Grand Jackpot, it said. I looked down at the few bills in my hand. "Feeling lucky?" Hector asked with a grin. I hesitated. $10 was a lot for me, but something about the colors, the sparkle. Or maybe it was just the quiet whisper in my chest that said, why not? "You know what?" I said. "Give me one ticket." He smiled. "Big numbers this week. You never know." He slid the freshly printed ticket across the counter. I took my pen, one I always kept in my purse, and turned the ticket over. Without thinking twice, I wrote my name on the back. Gloria M. Evans. A habit I had kept for years. Just in case, I always told myself. Good luck, Ms. Gloria. I thanked him and tucked the ticket inside my little recipe book, right between Grandma's apple pie and the banana bread Derek used to love. That night, I boiled some pasta, watched a little TV, and slipped the ticket onto the side table near the kitchen. I didn't think much of it. The next morning, Derek dropped by unannounced. He looked rushed and a little sweaty, like he'd run across town. "Hey," he said, barely making eye contact. "I need to borrow your charger, mine's busted." I waved toward the kitchen. "Help yourself. I just made some tea." He disappeared into the other room while I pulled out 2 mugs. I could hear his footsteps, the cabinet opening, a pause, longer than I expected. When he came back, his hands were empty. "Actually, I gotta run. Thanks, Mom." "You didn't even drink your tea," I said, puzzled. "Another time," he said quickly, already halfway to the door. He kissed me on the cheek and disappeared. It wasn't until 2 days later, while tidying up, that I noticed the lottery ticket was gone. I opened the recipe book. It fell open to the banana bread page. No ticket. At first, I thought maybe I had misplaced it. I searched the counter, the junk drawer, even under the fridge. I'm not a forgetful person, but it was just gone. Still, I didn't say anything. It was just a ticket, just a maybe. Then I saw the news. On the local station, a man had come forward to claim the $15 million mega grand prize. The winning ticket had been bought at Hector's gas station. The screen flashed to Derek and Tina, smiling in a blurry cell phone photo outside a government building. I dropped my mug. The pieces shattered across the floor. The TV anchor said he'd be receiving his check soon, that there were some standard processing procedures. But everything seemed in order. Derek, holding my ticket. I sank to the floor and picked up the broken ceramic pieces, one by one. My hands shook as I pulled out the old recipe book again just to be sure. Gone. Then I remembered. I had signed it. Clear as day. Gloria M. Evans. I always did, every single time. My knees ached as I stood up, but something inside me had already stiffened. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. That ticket didn't belong to Derek. Derek was beaming on the television. Wearing a brand new leather jacket and sunglasses on his head like some kind of celebrity, he stood outside the lottery claim office with Tina gripping his arm. Reporters crowded around him, asking questions, snapping pictures. He held up the winning ticket like a trophy. "I've worked hard my whole life," Derek said with that fake, humble voice he used when cameras were on. "This is a blessing." Hard work? He hadn't held a steady job in years. I sat at home in my tiny kitchen, staring at the screen with my hands clenched around a cold mug of tea. The news anchor said Derek had come forward to claim the prize. There was one sentence that made me sit straighter. "The Lottery Commission will now begin its standard verification process. This includes ticket validation, identity confirmation, and signature review." Signature review. I took a deep breath, because on the back of that ticket was my name, written in my own handwriting, just like I always did. Derek had paraded around like the money was his, but he never once flipped that ticket over. He didn't know, or maybe he never cared to check. On the screen, Derek laughed and told the reporter, "We've already picked out the car, black convertible, fully loaded." Tina giggled. "And we're getting a new house too, somewhere far from old problems, if you know what I mean." The reporter chuckled, not catching the hint. But I did. Old problems. Me. I turned off the TV and sat in the quiet. My little apartment, barely big enough for a full-size fridge, suddenly felt colder. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. That ticket was mine. I'd bought it. I'd signed it. And I still had the photo from the gas station's surveillance camera. Hector, the clerk, had always liked me. When I went back and explained what happened, He printed me a copy without hesitation. "Take care of yourself, Ms. Gloria," he said. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I placed the evidence inside a manila envelope. Meanwhile, Derek was living like a king. He bought that car, just like he said. A sleek black convertible that barely fit in the driveway of his rented townhouse. I saw it on social media. Tina posted a video of herself revving the engine, tagging it "Your Rich Life" and "No More Broke Days." He took his friends out for drinks, for steak dinners. He laughed and toasted to starting fresh. He didn't mention me once. Then came the house. It was a 2-story beauty in a gated community. White pillars, shiny wood floors, big open kitchen. I recognized it from a real estate listing I used to admire online when I wanted to dream a little. And now my son was claiming it. With my money. Neighbors who used to know us waved at him like he was some kind of hero. He didn't wave back. He was too busy pretending he earned everything. But behind all of it, I knew the truth. There were still steps left in the lottery process. The prize hadn't been paid yet. The final check hadn't been written. They had to verify everything, including the owner of the ticket. I had my name on the back. I had Hector's statement. I had nothing to hide. Derek had everything to lose. And the worst part? He didn't even know it yet. The air was colder than usual that evening. The sky had gone dark before I even realized how far I had walked. My suitcase bumped along behind me, one wheel squeaking with every step. I didn't have a home anymore. Derek had taken care of that before he threw me out. The apartment I'd been living in for years, it was technically under his name. He co-signed for me after I retired and said it would make the lease easier to get approved. I thought it was kindness. But as I learned later that afternoon, he'd already called the landlord and had my name removed. There was no place to go. I found myself sitting on a bench near the old bus station, the container of cookies still clutched in my lap. My fingers were stiff from the wind, my back aching. I'd never felt this alone before. People rushed by. Too busy, too distracted, too uninterested. At one point, a young man in a red hoodie passed me, slowed down, and handed me $1. I'm not homeless," I started to say. But he was already gone. Tears welled in my eyes. Not because of the insult, but because maybe I was homeless now. I sat there until my legs went numb. Eventually, a city worker passed and said gently, "Ma'am, the overnight shelter's opening soon. You're welcome to come if you don't have anywhere safe to go." I nodded, ashamed but grateful. The shelter wasn't what I imagined. It was warm, at least. The room was filled with thin mattresses lined up in rows and women bundled in blankets, many of them older than me. Some whispered to themselves, others cried quietly into pillows. I picked a corner cot and sat with my back to the wall. A kind woman with silver hair named Joyce sat next to me, offering half of her granola bar. "You knew?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Rough night?" Another nod. She didn't pry. She just shared her blanket and pulled it over both of us. "Get some rest, sweetheart. Whatever brought you here, it doesn't define you." That night, I stared at the ceiling tiles, wide-eyed, sleep refusing to come. All I could think about was how fast my world had turned upside down. From baking cookies in a warm kitchen to lying next to strangers in a shelter, all within hours. I thought about Derek, about his laugh when he was a boy, about how proud I was when he graduated, even if it took him longer than most, about how I worked double shifts at the library so he could go on that school trip to Washington, D.C. I thought about all the nights I went to bed hungry just so he wouldn't. And now, he was sleeping in a mansion built on my stolen fortune. I closed my eyes, and for the first time that day, I allowed myself to cry. But just as quickly as the tears came, something else rose inside me. Not bitterness, not hate, resolve. The next morning, I folded the blanket carefully and thanked Joyce. I left the shelter early and walked back to Hector's gas station. My legs ached with every step, but I had work to do. Hector was behind the counter sipping coffee. He raised his eyebrows when he saw me. Ms. Gloria, are you all right? I need your help, I said softly. I explained what had happened, about the ticket, about Derek, about the eviction. He didn't hesitate. He pulled up the security footage from the day I bought the ticket. There I was, small, bundled in my old coat, signing the back of the ticket before slipping it into my recipe book. You wrote your name clear as day, he said. Do you want a copy? I nodded. He printed the still image and slipped it into a folder. Then he looked me in the eye. You've got the truth on your side, Ms. Gloria. I gripped the folder tightly and whispered, I just hope that's enough. It had been a quiet morning in Derek's new neighborhood, the kind of quiet that made people feel safe, rich, and untouchable. Derek stood barefoot in the doorway of his brand new kitchen, sipping imported espresso from a sleek glass mug. Tina twirled in front of the oversized mirror by the stairs, admiring her reflection in a silk robe. They had it all now. A luxury SUV in the driveway, designer shoes, a real estate agent calling about investment properties. The check hadn't even cleared yet, but Derek wasn't worried. Everything was falling into place. Until the knock. 3 sharp knocks, firm, direct, and unmistakably official. Derek furrowed his brow. Expecting someone? Tina peeked out the blinds. I don't recognize the car. Derek opened the door casually, still holding his espresso, but his smirk faded the moment he saw the 2 men standing on the porch. One wore a suit with a golden lottery commission badge clipped to his belt. The other was a uniformed officer, Officer Martinez, with a notepad in hand. Derek Evans? The man in the suit asked. Yes? Derek replied slowly. I'm Mr. Shaw from the State Lottery Commission. We're here following up on the mega grand jackpot claim you filed last week. Yeah, I already did all that. I've got the ticket, Derek said, raising an eyebrow. We're aware, Mr. Shaw replied calmly. However, during our standard verification process, a discrepancy came up that we need to clarify in person. Tina appeared at Derek's side. What kind of discrepancy? The officer cleared his throat. We've received a formal contest of ownership. Another individual has stepped forward claiming to be the rightful owner of the winning ticket. Derek's eyes narrowed. Who? I can't disclose that just yet, Mr. Shaw said. But we do have something to show you. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a scanned copy of the back of the lottery ticket. He held it up. There it was, clear as day, handwritten in blue ink. Gloria M. Evans. Derek's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Tina blinked. Wait, what is this? That's the original ticket, as received by the commission, Mr. Shaw explained. It appears to be signed by someone else. Our process requires us to verify ownership through signature, identification, and time-stamped purchase records. There must be a mistake, Derek said, his voice rising. Officer Martinez took out a folder and handed it to Derek. There's also CCTV footage submitted with the claim, showing the moment the ticket was purchased and signed. The footage aligns with the signature on the back of the ticket. Derek's hands trembled as he flipped through the printouts. There she was, his mother, standing at the gas station counter, calmly signing the back of the ticket before sliding it into her purse. You're saying she owns the ticket? Tina gasped. She's the verified purchaser, Mr. Shaw said flatly. And based on the footage, she signed the ticket before it ever left her hands. No, this is ridiculous, Derek snapped. It was sitting on her counter. She doesn't even play the lottery. She did that day, Officer Martinez said, and she followed every rule. Tina backed away slowly. You said it was yours. You told me you bought it. I thought I did, Derek stammered. It was just sitting there. Officer Martinez gave him a long, quiet look. That's not how this works, sir. Mr. Shaw closed his briefcase. For now, the payout is frozen until this matter is resolved. There will be an official hearing. We suggest you gather any documents you have. But based on what we've seen, your claim may be considered invalid. Derek stood in stunned silence as the 2 men walked back to their car. Tina turned on him, eyes wild. "Did you steal it from her?" "I didn't steal anything. I thought it was just a random ticket. She leaves stuff lying around all the time," Derek shouted. Tina didn't reply. She just shook her head and stormed upstairs. Derek stood alone at the front door, the espresso mug now cold in his hand, staring at the printed signature that had just destroyed his dream life. And for the first time since the cameras stopped flashing, the house felt eerily quiet. The moving truck had come and gone. The house that once echoed with Derek's laughter and Tina's fake giggles now stood cold and empty. The designer rugs were gone. The sparkling crystal vases no longer caught the light from the windows. Even the massive flat screen on the living room wall had vanished, taken by the repossession company once the lottery commission froze the payout. What remained was silence, and a single envelope taped to the front door. Derek arrived hours later, expecting to find Tina, maybe even a second chance at convincing someone, anyone, that this was still salvageable. Instead, he was met with that letter, his name written in familiar, soft handwriting. To Derek, from Mom. He stared at it for a long time, his jaw tight. He didn't want to open it, but he had nothing else left to do. He tore the envelope open with a sharp swipe of his thumb. "Derek, by the time you read this, the furniture will be gone, the keys returned, and Tina, well, I imagine she's already packed her bags. I want to make one thing clear. I never wanted your money. I never asked for anything. I would have been happy with a hug and a thank you. But instead, you threw me out of your house like I was a stranger. You called me a witch. You laughed while your wife watched me struggle to gather my things. And all this time, you didn't even realize the ticket you were flaunting wasn't yours to begin with." "Yes, Derek, I bought that ticket. I signed it. I even have the receipt and security footage to prove it. The only reason you had it in your hands was because you took it. Quietly. Like it didn't matter. But it did matter. That $15 million could have changed both of our lives. You could have come to me. You could have asked. I would have given you everything I had, even if I only had $10 to my name. I always have. I always did. But what you gave me was shame. You took the woman who raised you, who gave up her dreams to keep food on your plate, and you humiliated her like trash. So now, here we are. No, I didn't press charges. Not yet. I figured life would give you its own lesson. I hope one day you understand what you lost, and not just the money. Mom." Derek sat down on the cold marble floor, still holding the letter in both hands. His eyes were locked on the words, reading them over and over again. The corners were wrinkled from how tightly he gripped the paper. The house was echoing now, his footsteps sounding louder in the empty rooms. He had thought the money would solve everything. He thought it would buy Tina's loyalty, cover up the years he wasted, and let him walk over everyone, including the woman who once stayed up all night sewing patches into his jeans when he was 12. Tina had left without a word. She didn't even leave a note. She just took the jewelry, the bags, and the last shred of patience she had for him. Derek dragged himself upstairs to the guest room, his mother's old room, the place she used to fold his laundry and pray for his happiness. There on the bed was the cookie container she had brought the day he kicked her out. Untouched. He sat on the edge of the bed and opened the lid. The cookies were a little stale now, but the scent of cinnamon and sugar filled the room instantly. The same scent that used to fill their old kitchen when he was a child. When things were simple. When love didn't have a price tag. He took one, bit into it, and finally let the silence take over. 3 days had passed since the knock on Derek's door. The sky was bright that morning, not overly sunny, just clear, peaceful. I wore my nicest dress, a soft blue one I hadn't pulled from the closet in years. I'd ironed it the night before, even polished my old shoes. Not for anyone else, but for me. As I stepped through the tall glass doors of the state lottery headquarters, I felt the weight of everything I'd carried lifting off me, inch by inch. The receptionist looked up. "Good morning, ma'am. May I help you?" I nodded and reached into my bag. I handed her the ticket, carefully sealed in a plastic sleeve, along with my ID, the photo Hector printed, and a printed copy of my notarized statement. "My name is Gloria M. Evans," I said clearly, "and I believe this ticket belongs to me." She blinked, then smiled softly. "Yes, ma'am. We've been expecting you." Within moments, I was escorted to a private office where Mr. Shaw, calm professional, greeted me with a firm handshake. "We've reviewed everything," he said, "and your documentation checks out perfectly. The signed ticket, surveillance footage, timestamp, store receipt, there's no dispute left. This ticket is legally and rightfully yours." I didn't smile. Not yet. He slid a folder across the table. "You'll be receiving the full payout. After taxes, it will come to $10.8 million. The funds will be deposited into the account you listed pending your signature here." My hand shook just a little as I signed. Not from nerves, just disbelief. It was really mine. Not because I fought for it, but because it had always been mine. When I left the building, the fresh summer air filled my lungs like a promise. And that's when I made the first decision. I wasn't going to waste this chance on revenge. I knew what kind of person Derek had become. But I also knew the kind of woman I had chosen to be. The money didn't change who I was. I didn't want a mansion. I didn't want expensive clothes. I wanted peace. I moved into a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, modest, comfortable. A garden in the back, birds that sang in the morning, and neighbors who smiled without pretending. I bought a used SUV. Nothing flashy. And I took Joyce, the woman from the shelter, out to lunch. Then I offered her a place to stay until she got back on her feet. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Just say you'll let me teach you how to bake banana bread," I said with a smile. We laughed. The second thing I did was visit the women's shelter that had taken me in that night. I met the director, listened to their needs, and quietly donated enough to build a second wing. Beds, warm blankets, private showers, a kitchen with enough room for a dozen women to cook at once. I never put my name on anything. That was never the point. As for Derek, I never heard from him. Not a call, not a letter, nothing. But sometimes I'd hear whispers from people who used to know him, that the house was sold, that the car was repossessed, that Tina left, that he moved into a cheap apartment far from town. And though part of me ached, part of me also understood. He needed to lose everything to learn the value of what he'd thrown away. Some lessons come late, but they still come. One morning, I baked a fresh batch of oatmeal cookies, just like I used to. I placed a few in a small tin, wrote a note on a yellow Post-it, and walked to the mailbox. "No hard feelings. Life is long. Take care of yourself. Mom." I never knew if he received it, but I hoped, somewhere, somehow, that he read it. Because even after everything, I was still his mother. And some love, no matter how battered, never really goes away. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us keep telling stories that matter.